Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 7th December 2024, and we welcome you to this recap video for our Bhagavad Gita study session. We continue along our endeavors of chapter 10. So I'll bring up the screen momentarily and show, we went through, of course, a couple of verses which were after the recap quiz. The recap quiz covered last time's content, which was a single verse, chapter 10, verse 8. And as always, we encourage you to look at the description for this video to take a look at the free community portal link where you can get the slides that will be shown, all the other reference material and recap videos such as the one you're watching, all for your benefit and progress. So let's take a look at how that unfolded. So as I mentioned, we covered a couple of verses today, chapter 10, verses 9 and 10. But again, before you jump there, do try to look at the slides and go through the quiz questions, whether it's once or multiple times, for your benefit. That set of quiz questions, again, covers chapter 10, verse 8 from last time. Just sounds like one verse, but it's an important verse with a long commentary and a lot of different terms important with the aspect of creation. So do take a look at all those different quiz questions. With that, then, we get into today's two verses, chapter 10, verse 9 first, followed by chapter 10, verse 10. So chapter 10, verse 9. Machchitta madgata prana bodhayantah parasparam kathayantascha mam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. So chapter 10, verse 9 has the catchphrase contented and conversational. We'll take a look at Swamiji's commentary after looking at one or two important words as well. So here, let's have you focus on this one. Mat gata pranaha. Those who have surrendered their lives to Sri Krishna. So you can add that to your Sanskrit dictionaries. Make sure we understand. Mat gata pranaha. Those who have given their pran, right? As they say, right? Surrendered their lives to Sri Krishna. Very deep, of course, in this case. And of course, we also saw, we've seen this before, Tushyanti, but I'll go ahead and suggest we add Ramanti perhaps to our dictionaries. That might be a little newer or less heard of, maybe. So Ramanti is they delight. So certain people, of course, the wise who perfectly worship Sri Krishna, they have certain criteria that they are following and meeting, and eventually they get to have delight. We'll talk a little bit about what that is. So indeed, two aspects. With their minds fixed on Sri Krishna and their lives surrendered to him. So again, mat gata pranaha. Then such devotees have some elements we now see. They remain contented in him. So tushyanti, satisfaction. They derive great satisfaction, in fact, even beyond, and they get bliss in enlightening one another about him, about Sri Krishna. So we saw that bodhayantaha, enlightening, remember, with divine knowledge of God. And if you recall, tiny homework question, bodhayantaha, some part of that reminds us or me of Bodhi, the Bodhi tree, Lord Buddha getting enlightenment in Bodh Gaya under the Bodhi tree. Are they connected? Take a look, do some tiny few minutes of research so you can, do that when you get some time. So that bliss happens in sharing and having that enlightenment with one another. And we also saw speaking, kathayantaha, conversing about Sri Krishna's glories, just as we mentioned you try to do, for instance, in satsang on Sundays. So we see in the commentary, Swamiji, reminds us how whatever we follow or pursue, the mind tends to get more and more absorbed in that. That ends up becoming the basis and or the purpose of our life. It gives us strength in many cases as well. And as he says, devotees who can get meaning from, of course, absorption of their minds in full devotion to the Lord, then they feel it is as essential to remember God as a fish feels it is essential to have water. As you recall, I mentioned as a side joke in class and could very well apply to, let's say your kids, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, who knows, even us perhaps. Many times we feel it is even more essential to wake up and jump to our phones before even, breathing or brushing, so to say. So just as a fish feels it's essential to have water, or the example I gave humorously, These true devotees feel it is essential to remember God all the time. Swamiji gives us a few more examples and quotes from the Bible, book of Matthew, and says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be." So if you recall in class, I mentioned that I was reminded contented and conversational is the catchphrase here with alliteration. Humorously, perhaps again, it could also be checkbooks and credit cards. Because for people who are studying their checkbooks and credit cards, that's their focus, it's material. We, of course, are really practicing to be well beyond that. So Swamiji says if someone's spending money on fancy cars or luxurious holidays, that's where their heart is. In contrast, someone who's donating to charitable causes, that is where their heart is. As I said, many or all of you, right, as spiritual practitioners and devotees and followers, along with Maharajji, Swamiji, JKYog, pursuing that are truly dedicating your minds and hearts, your seva, your charitable contributions, donations as well, to show, of course, where your heart, where your purpose, and where your treasure lies as well. So, as a consequence from such surrender, again, mad gata pranaha, by surrendering our lives to Sri Krishna, then will come contentment. Because, as we saw and connected it way early to chapter 2, verse 47 as well, we don't seek that entitlement and we are not entitled to the fruits of our rewards. So we lovingly strive to take everything in our stride. Could be positive outcomes, could be negative ones. With equipoise, with equanimity, we accept everything for the pleasure and enjoyment of the Lord. And therefore, we are understanding and appreciating that everything is the grace and the will of God. So then, in that final paragraph of the commentary, we saw, of course, Swamiji giving that visual imagery. Devotees' love for God is displayed in the characteristics we described above, but beyond that as well, it also manifests on their lips. So keep that in mind because that connects to the important words we have seen before in chapter 9, verse 14, that I'll take us to here. Chapter 9, verse 14, always singing his divine glories, etc., and then constantly worshipping Sri Krishna in loving devotion. Swamiji, in the second paragraph, had introduced us to Shravan, hearing, Kirtan, chanting, and Smaran, remembering. So, Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran. These are in chapter 9, verse 14's commentary. And back here, Swamiji connects them as well, in addition to Bodhayanti, as we saw, enlightening others about divine knowledge of God, getting therefore great satisfaction, Tushyanti, and also being delighted. Delighted again in the circumstances, the glories of God, Ramanti. All that is connected to that threefold process of bhakti. Remember, Shravan, Kirtan, and Smaran. As always, when we talk about glories, we know it's encompassing that common set of 5, 6 words we've heard: names, forms, virtues, pastimes, abodes, saints, and Swamiji adds this time also devotees. We've heard it as Nam, Roop, Gun, Leela, Dham. And then saints, of course, is Sant. So all this is important for those who are, of course, with their minds fixed on Sri Krishna and with their lives surrendered to Him. They're getting contentment, they're getting satisfaction, they get bliss in enlightening themselves and others about divine knowledge of God and in conversing about His glories. So then perhaps Swamiji, of course, offers the natural question that we might think is, how would Sri Krishna respond? So that is chapter 10, verse 10. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. So, chapter 10, verse 10 has a simple catchphrase with alliteration again, God's gift. Of course, many things, many verses as well also talk about gifts perhaps, but this one truly, as we saw in class and now see in this recap video, we hear about God's gift to us. How and when? Well, let's see. So we talked about minds being fixed on God and surrendering lives to Sri Krishna. So then those whose minds are always united with Sri Krishna in loving devotion, the gift we get is the divine knowledge that we need to be able to attain him. So let's look at one or two important words as well. We've seen this one before, no harm revisiting it. We have satata yuktanam. Mummy has mentioned whether they are split or joined. We've seen them in different verses previously. Satata, constantly, ever, always. Yuktanam, yukt, yog, union, steadfast, unison. So ever steadfast, totally united with Sri Krishna in loving devotion. Let's look at this one, Priti Purvakam. Many of you recognize Preet or Priti, and that is with love. And then, of course, we've seen this also in its fragments, Buddhi Yogam, divine knowledge. That is very, very important. Not to add more, but in case you're looking for a verb, then we also have come or, to attain God, and that is upayanti. So plenty here. And again, as Swamiji says in the commentary, divine knowledge cannot be just via dreams or imaginations. We cannot get divine knowledge of God just by having the flight of our imagination. Someone may be, very proud of their mind or intellect. They may think that they have a very, very powerful mental machine, but all said and done, that is material. The material cannot comprehend the spiritual, the divine. That can happen not with self effort, but only with God's grace. And so Swamiji gives several examples, as always, from the scriptures, from the Kena Upanishad. Those who think they can understand God with their intellects have no understanding of God, and so on. In fact, I mentioned, and we'll try to put it in your spare time video links as well that come up here for you to all look at. Recently, a few weeks ago, there was a video that I think was pretty long that talked about, the crux being, if you think you know God, then you do not know God. Only he and she who say that we do not know God, we cannot comprehend God, they are the ones who eventually can and will know God, because God will grace them with what is needed to know God, which is divine knowledge to be able to attain him. So that's again Kena Upanishad. We have from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Again, you cannot comprehend God by self-effort, and self-effort we think based upon our powerful intellects. We have from the Ramayana, Rama atarkya buddhimana bani, mata hamara asasuna hisayani. Again, Lord Ram, the Supreme, is beyond the scope of our intellect, mind, and words. So not just intellect and mind, but even our words. As I said in class, finite lifetimes we have, finite sets of words that we will know and come across and be able to state. God is well beyond that. So the only way, indeed, there is a way to be able to know Sri Krishna, but how that happens is from his grace. He will bestow that divine knowledge to certain souls at a certain point in time. So that happens not as a result of intellectual gymnastics, as Swamiji says, nor, as I mentioned in class, add this to your English dictionaries or revisit it, whimsical. It's not just someone who happens to be lucky or fortunate. Yes, you describe someone who gets that divine knowledge of God as indeed lucky or fortunate, but it's not because they were lucky or fortunate that they got that. It's not random, it's not just by chance. So whimsical, not just by chance or fortune like that. There is a certain process, there is an eligibility criteria, which again we have seen, fixing the mind upon Sri Krishna, surrendering your life to him, conversing about him, having contentment, being enlightened, and having enlightenment or sharing that with others. Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran, with all that, when the mind is always united with Sri Krishna in loving devotion, then to those souls, he will make them the recipients of his grace. So that is the crux to keep in mind. As we also showed in class, do take a look at the flyer and make sense of that. The question here was, if you insert your mind with loving devotion, what will the divine ATM dispense to you? Here, if you noticed, we have Radha Krishna, again, a little faded here, faint purposely, put here as part of this machine, of course, as a parallel, but really to show that if your mind is united with God, if you do that, you follow that criteria, you do hope that there is something that's going to be dispensed from here. This is all divine. And of course, we're not looking for material rewards or money. it is that divine knowledge that will be dispensed by Sri Krishna. So that was something to try to relate visually. You unite with love, as you see all around in the flyer. And then, in fact, we think, okay, divine knowledge, maybe you want to represent that by books. What's interesting is here, this person's bag already has some. You just can't see it, perhaps. We don't sometimes appreciate or recognize it all, but it's with us. We want to, of course, get that complete divine knowledge. Here we're getting some scriptural knowledge, etc., but we're seeking that divine knowledge that will be dispensed by the Lord Himself for us to, at some point, eventually attain Him. So that's the crux again of chapter 10, verses 9, contented and conversational, and chapter 10, verse 10, God's gift. As always, do take a look at this material and study hard for the recap quiz that will cover these two verses when we meet next time. Also, as we announced in class, of course, today starts the first of 4 different days of festivities for Bhagavad Gita Jayanti. Bhagavad Gita Jayanti itself is on Wednesday, 11th December 2024. Partake of as much of that nectar as you can, whether it's in person or online at the Radha Krishna Temple of Dallas in Allen. And of course, till we meet next time, which is Saturday, 14th December 2024, 8 a.m. Central Time, 7:30 p.m. India time. Take care and Radhe Radhe.